The last time they met, it was for the Big 12 championship, and it was a great game, 23-20 Oklahoma. That only culminated, though, decades and decades and decades of classic rivalry games, typically on Thanksgiving weekend on that Friday. Oklahoma, Nebraska, it brings to mind so many great games, great players, and matchups that shook the college football world and determined national championships. They get back together in Norman. And so we will talk Sooners and Huskers from the Oklahoma side here for the next hour. Of course, courtesy Jason Ray from Last Word on College Football, who heads up our Oklahoma coverage right here at the Voice of College Football. Please join him for postgame coming up after the OU Nebraska game. Jason, how's it going today?
Very good, Mark. Thanks for having me on as always.
Of course. Got to have you on. We don't have a show without you, Jason. So basically setting everything up for this week. Let's start with personnel issues and concerns with Oklahoma. Two in the secondary, Billy Bowman and Woody Washington. And Oklahoma fans, we would point you to our conversation last night on our Nebraska show, in which we invited Jason on for the last half hour or so. So you can get the Nebraska take there on the Nebraska channel, Nebraska Live, and Jason's take on the rivalry as well. But Woody Washington, Billy Bowman.
Yeah, so two components of Oklahoma's secondary that, quite frankly struggled a little bit against Tulane. Was better, obviously, against Western Carolina, but still those are two starters in the secondary with Woody Washington and Billy Bowman. As you mentioned, Billy Bowman had a little bit of a hamstring thing that happened really early in the game on Saturday against Western Carolina. So as we talked a little bit before last night, as you mentioned, Mark, these hamstrings are kind of funny just in terms of how long. You never really know exactly how long it's going to take. It could be a slight tweak that could, kids could get over it in a week, or it could be something that really kind of bothers him all year long. So, not sure to the extent, but it looks like he's doubtful for this game as well. And so I think Oklahoma's looking at some different options at the nickelback position. I've seen that Oklahoma has started working Justin Harrington there a little bit. They've also started working Delarian Turner-Yell. Wouldn't be surprised to see Delarian Turner-Yell kind of move over to a nickel spot for this week, and maybe Oklahoma, Key Lawrence plays a little bit more at that safety position for Oklahoma. So, yeah, I think that's a concern coming into this game, specifically how they played against Tulane, more specifically the second half. But then, with the best team that Oklahoma has faced here in the non-conference schedule, to be missing two starters is concerning. Also, we had talked off air. Brian Darby, I believe, is out as well for Oklahoma at the wide receiver position. So, having him out plus Theo Weiss, starts to question that depth a little bit at the wide receiver position. Oklahoma has looked pretty solid, a little bit better than what they were last year in terms of the product. So I think you've got three or four guys that are probably playing maybe a little bit more minutes than maybe they have in the past couple of weeks. So Marvin Mims, Mario Williams, Jaden Hazelwood, Mike Woods. Those are the your four main guys, and then you've got Drake Stoops as well. So maybe not as deep here, but not as big of a concern at the wide receiver position as maybe the secondary.
Brian Darby, 4 catches, 42 yards through the first 2 weeks. Bowman and Washington both with 5 tackles. Bowman with a tackle for loss. And Jason, when a situation comes to light like this regarding injuries, it's always interesting to see whether the option and the choice is to go with the next man up, meaning the next guy in the depth chart at that position, boom, just move him up, that there's enough confidence in that particular player. Or are we going to slide somebody over from another position and then maybe fill their position from the second or third team with somebody that we feel more confident with over there? And it certainly kind of shows the hand of the coaching staff in regards to who's developing well and who they have confidence in at that point.
No, absolutely, Mark. I think that's a good point. And I think that's why I mentioned I think they probably look to slide a Delarian Turner-Yell over just because of his, he's a third-year starter. in the back end for Oklahoma. So I think they're probably a little bit more comfortable with him at the nickelback spot. Jeremiah Cradell, really played a lot there. Wasn't extremely impressive, to be honest. Just in terms of his and his tackling was a little bit weak, I would say, against Western Carolina. Not completely weak, but just wasn't as aggressive and sound fundamentally as you would like. So I think they probably feel a little bit more comfortable with with Delarian Turner-Yale switching over there as probably the starter, with Key Lawrence there in the back end. And the safety position in the secondary is probably one of the ones where they don't have as much depth as they would like, a solid depth. So I think that also kind of plays into that decision. Do they not feel as comfortable with that, with the depth, either at the nickelback spot or even at the safety spot. So I think to your question about the cornerback, I think it's a little bit different situation. I think you've probably got a guy like Latrell McCutcheon that could slide in there. I think he started last week, as a freshman. Alex Grinch was talked after the Tulane game exactly who was the most impressive of those kids in the secondary. He first and foremost mentioned Latrell McCutcheon, a long kid, very athletic. So I think he probably, if he wasn't already, he's probably there, slotted for that spot, probably along with DJ Graham in the secondary.
Oklahoma Live, folks. This is where we get together each and every week with Jason Ray from Last Word on College Football to break down the Sooners. And this, of course, being quite the game in regards to a historic matchup against Nebraska. We've got this also simulcasting this live stream on our Nebraska channel right now. So Nebraska fans, we may have a little bit more of a Nebraska feel and contingent here today. So we invite your comments and questions over the next 45 minutes or so for Jason and myself. And then Greg Peterson from Husker Online, I believe, is joining us for the last 20 minutes or so. Jason, we had talked last week in the aftermath of various injuries, suspensions, departures, everything that had gone on at the running back position, what that position would look like going forward with the two in place, steady guys, proven guys, Eric Gray, Kennedy Brooks. And then after that, some questions and who's going to fill that void. With a game like Western Carolina and pretty much the entire roster at Lincoln Riley's disposal, did you get a better feel for which direction they may go as a third and fourth option?
Yeah, I think you got the feel that the two walk-ons are probably where he's going to go next. They played a decent amount, specifically in the second half of that game against Western Carolina. Both got in the end zone. I believe Jaden Knowles actually got in the end zone twice, if I remember right. One on the ground and then another one through the air. So I think those are the two kids that will play. I think both of those kids looked like they were capable. I think the most interesting thing for me will be, Mark, if they get an opportunity in a game like Nebraska or the Big 12 game, later in the year when they need, when Oklahoma needs them, do they have the ability to, how good are they in crunch time, or how good are they when the game is not, is not in doubt, so to speak. So I think that will prove dividends just to see what that looks like. Just looking at the stats, Jaden Knowles, 4 carries for 37 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, had 2 catches for 65 yards. And when you look at Todd Hudson, he had 9 carries for 25 yards through on the ground as well. So I think, I think Jaden Knowles is probably the guy, Mark, that would get the first call in terms of, exactly what that looks like from a pecking order perspective. But I think Oklahoma's comfortable. I think a little bit more at ease than probably they were, at least fans kind of watching the game than they were before that, just looking to see seeing exactly how well they seem to play in that game.
We've got the live chat on for this Oklahoma live stream. Please consider that, as well as Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just search MarkRogersTV, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. I would not be shocked at a Nebraska win, just because at this point in watching football for the last 40 plus years, I'm not shocked by anything, but I would be about as shocked as I can possibly be. I know in looking at sitting here in this same chair taking calls late Saturday night at the end of the college football day and looking over and seeing that Stanford was up on USC 42-13 in the fourth quarter. That's about as surprised as I've been this year through 2 weeks. I would not be surprised if Nebraska made it a competitive game, especially since what we saw against Tulane, knowing that Nebraska's got better recruited talent. I don't know if they've got their game together as well as Tulane at this point, but Oklahoma's they're a 22-point favorite for a reason. That's a fair line. That's basically my evaluation or judgment of these two teams, is that Oklahoma should win fairly comfortably, although it may be a really good game for 2 to 3 quarters. We got our Nebraska contingent here. Don Miller, GBR, Alan, GBR, but Alan follows that up with, as a reasonable fan here, who's going full throttle for his team, of course, rooting, but the realistic Alan says 49-24 Oklahoma. So there we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Mark, the thing that I keep going back to, just kind of looking at this game, is you can look at Nebraska as sort of maybe even kind of like a wounded animal coming into this game, in terms of, they have their backs to the wall a little bit. I know it's critically important for this Nebraska program and Scott Frost to at least get to a bowl game. I think that would be a huge, huge win, I think, just overall for this program. And like I said last night, really a very proud program that's been humbled a little bit over the last few years. So, how do they react in a big-time game like this? I know they've played, in the Big Ten. They play, in Michigan. They played in Ohio State. So they're used to, maybe the big stage, but, on the national stage more so than they have in the past. How do they react to that? Is this the Nebraska team that we saw against Illinois, or is it the Nebraska team that we saw this past week against Buffalo, which wasn't great? Buffalo's not a great team, but they're a respectable mid-major team. So yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see. I could see, honestly, Mark, I could see situations or scenarios where it could get out of hand a little bit, in terms of, and when I say out of hand, 31, 35 point victory. But I could also see, a situation, what's interesting is, I'm going back a little bit, Mark. This reminds me a bit of Alabama in 2001, 2002, when Oklahoma played them. They were down, a program that had a lot of highs before that, and obviously after that they've had, but they were, kind of on their way back, Saban what obviously wasn't, coach at Alabama yet, but really a proud program. Oklahoma, they played Oklahoma extremely tough. I think Oklahoma was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of the favorite that they are now against Nebraska. And you saw in that game, Dennis Francione was the head coach at Alabama at that time. They had a couple of fake field goals. They had an onside kick. So they were a team that just really pulled out all the stops in terms of doing anything and everything that they could to win this game. And they took Oklahoma. Oklahoma had to come from behind late to win that game. So I could definitely see a situation like that occurring as well.
Greg Peterson from Husker Online joining us for the last portion of the show. He has said this. It's been backed up certainly by a number of fans in the chat, that the Nebraska football team looks more like a high-end Big Ten team than they did a couple of years ago, that Scott Frost has really targeted strength and conditioning, nutrition, all those things, and that the line play, not necessarily the line play, but the look at the athletes coming off the bus is more in line with what you would expect. The play hasn't caught up to the look of the team, but at least they are going out there against what would have been in previous years, Ohio State, Wisconsin, etc., and line up and look like they aren't just going to get blown off the ball physically, that they've worked on that side of the program. We're going to have to see a Nebraska offense that we haven't seen in years to keep up with Oklahoma, even if the defense does its job, because the Nebraska defense, it's not great. It's a very solid unit, though. They're good on defense. They brought back 10 starters. I don't know how much exactly he's playing, but they brought in a 5-star transfer from Ohio State Tyreek Smith to play a corner. And so that would be their 10 starters plus bringing in a former 5-star. The defense played well last year. They've gotten off to a good start playing well this year. The defense is not the issue, but you can only ask a defense against an Oklahoma offense to do so much that this offense is just not showing me anything. I did not see the Buffalo game. I did not see the Fordham game. I watched them against Illinois, and I think because they played all Big Ten games last year, I watched them basically every game last year, and the offense just is void of playmakers and is not getting that push up front. The quarterback is a turnover machine and has been in the past. So it's going to have to be an offensive display that we have not seen out of Nebraska.
No, you're absolutely right, Mark. And just, I've looked a little bit. I watched bits and pieces of the Buffalo game on Saturday, but I've rewatched some of it. And I think that's the thing that this morning I watched some of it. I think the thing that I come away with is exactly what you had said, the lack of playmakers, really, Mark, at the skill position perspective. When you look at Adrian Martinez, he's got, 728 yards passing through 3 games, but only has 4 touchdown passes in those 3 games combined. And then you look at the running game. Adrian Martinez is more than doubled, exactly double the next leading running back, which is Marquis Stepp, with 128 yards through 3 games. So I think that productivity at the skill position is really not what you would expect out of a Nebraska team. So I think, as I mentioned last night, I think one of the keys for Oklahoma is their ability to keep Adrian Martinez in the pocket, because as Oklahoma, you want him in the pocket looking and trying to throw the ball downfield, as opposed to him being a threat in the running game at the quarterback position. So, yeah, I think that's one glaring thing. And I think the other thing I mentioned, their offensive line is going to be challenged in this game, probably even more so than they were against Tulane, just because of the fact that, they've got some guys there. Maybe the productivity isn't completely there all the way, but you can tell that they have some guys that they're much better at the point of attack on the defensive line than they were in the past couple of years.
Sooner Thrawn is telling us that Alex Grinch will be daring Adrian Martinez to throw, but his passing is very up and down. Yes, Adrian Martinez is not a downfield passer. He just isn't. He's proven that throughout his career. We've seen plenty of him to know he's a running threat, and he's a substantial running threat. He's not a once-in-a-lifetime generational running threat. He's not Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson, but he's at the top end of the sport. He's in the top percentile. But as a downfield thrower, he's lacking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's why I had mentioned on a couple of occasions, I think it's just so important for Oklahoma to be able to keep him in the pocket. So I think lane and rush integrity is going to be really big for Oklahoma, specifically on the ends. So, Oklahoma's played a lot of kids. They've played 31 guys on defense in the first game, played 38 Saturday against Western Carolina. Certainly would expect that to diminish a little bit, specifically on the defensive line, just to allow Oklahoma, the pass rush to be more consistent. Those guys that have played a lot more will probably play more consistently. So, yeah, I think that's for me, just looking at this game right now, that's the big, I wouldn't say concern, but key for Oklahoma is being able to keep. I like Oklahoma's chances to win, pretty convincingly, should the Sooners be able to do that and then control the line of scrimmage on the other side of the ball.
Don Miller going with Big Red 27-21. There you go, going with the upset with the heart. So you had made the comment last night, Jason, that some rivalries are built on hatred and some are built on respect. This was more on the respect side versus the Texas rivalry built more on hatred, which now the two clubs are moving on to the SEC, and there's some type of strange brotherhood or synergy there that's moving on to the SEC. But you don't expect any unique type attitude, environment in the stadium, vibe in the stadium, all generally goodwill toward the Huskers?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, Mark. Like we mentioned last night, this rivalry has been built on mutual respect for for the decades of the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s certainly when Oklahoma was down, but still very much built on respect. I know there was a lot of people that are a little bit some people were a little bit taken back with, what they felt like Nebraska running up the score a little bit in the 90s with some of Oklahoma's teams, specifically that 69-7 game. And I believe it was a 71 or 78-28 game in that neighborhood, and 96-98. So, but I think other than that, there's just a lot of excitement, I think, in the state of Oklahoma for this game being back. Having said that, these teams haven't played each other in 11 years, so I would venture a guess, hardly any of these kids even know anything about the rivalry outside of anything that they've just been told. So I think, I wouldn't expect anything other than mutual respect. However, with the kids on the field, you never know. But especially with Oklahoma and the fact that, they're probably, I would assume that their interest and intrigue in this game, being how they played against Tulane and then being Western Carolina, what it was, I think it should be sky high. So, obviously when you have emotions like that, you have to have your emotions in check early on. But yeah, I think I would expect nothing but the mutual respect that we've seen for years and years.
Folks, we've got some gear available at the voiceofcollegefootball.com. Just go to voiceofcollegefootball.com, go to the top of the screen, and you will see our store there. And then you can search based on various items, or you can just go to the particular team page, as you see right there with Oklahoma fans, Nebraska fans, anybody in the Power 5, you're good to go to shop around there. Also, if you would like to write for us at voiceofcollegefootball.com, go to the top of the screen as well. You will see where it says simply write for us. Click on that and go from there, and you will be contacting me directly about a writing opportunity at the Voice of College Football. So again, voiceofcollegefootball.com, and you can check out our gear right there. Lost my train of thought of where I was going to go to next. Shoot. Check out Jason's work on Last Word on College Football. Is there anything in particular that you're hitting this week, Jason?
The one thing that we did earlier this week was really kind of go back and look at the really a 50-year rewind of that game in 1971. Then we'll have more of kind of a preview later on in the week, as we just kind of from an analysis perspective, just looking at the game in a little more detail.
Very good. Oklahoma, Nebraska. It's a noon game Eastern time, so that's 11 o'clock local time. Can't imagine a lot of people are happy about that necessarily, but that's what it is for, I believe, Fox Sports, correct?
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot, Mark, made of this 11 a.m. kickoff, and it's one of the, I think, believe it or not, it's one of the things that's been kind of in Oklahoma's crawl in terms of what that TV deal has looked like, and I'm not going to say it's the main reason that Oklahoma has made the move to the SEC, but it's one of the reasons. So, and I think the big thing is Oklahoma had a lot of things that they would have liked to have been able to do throughout the day on campus, just in terms of commemorating this 50-year anniversary of this game, and just 11 a.m. kickoff doesn't really give as much opportunity to that that they would have liked. So yeah, I think now that it's here, I don't think too many people mind, but I think really from a planning perspective, there was just a lot of a concern and just a little frustration with kind of the continuous and more of their feeling of their lion's share of 11 a.m. kickoffs, especially at home.
Got Greg Peterson chiming in from Husker Online on Rivals. And again, everybody can go to our Nebraska discussion last night on our Nebraska channel with our Huskers live show that we have each and every Tuesday night with Greg. And Jason joined us for that conversation as well. So now we get the invite to Greg to join us for our Oklahoma. So welcome to enemy territory, Greg.
Sooner. How's it going, Jason? How's it going, Mark?
Good. How are you, sir?
Good.
What's going on today?
Oh, I just got back from working out in the cornfields, like we all do in our spare time here in Lincoln.
That's what the rumor is.
Yeah.
That's what everybody does, right? That's the only occupation in the state, right?
Exactly, yeah. We have to get up around here about 4:30 a.m. and make sure that we get all that corn worked over before we go to our day jobs.
It's funny. When I moved here, I'm in Connecticut. I've been here for 21 years. A certain company brought me here. Coming from Ohio, it's amazing on the East Coast. And I am surrounded by more woods and more animals than I've ever been in my lifetime, which is fine. There are bears all over the place and deer and everything else. But for some reason, because I'm on the East Coast, they think Ohio is nothing but cornfields. They have this, and I've had to let people know, when you've got 5 professional sports teams in one state, there have to be people around, and retail and restaurants. It kind of all goes together. You just don't have Cleveland Browns Stadium in the middle of a cornfield and nobody to go to the games, So Ohio isn't exactly what maybe you've made it out to be. So, yeah. So, Greg, what does your typical week look like, and what does your week look like in preparation for this game in regards to the Zoom calls, the news conferences, getting out to practice? That's on Wednesday, right?
No, this is the one day that we have off here.
Okay.
For media access, and the week's pretty much winded down for us at this point. Coach Frost will talk Thursday morning, and then it's game day. So all the heavy lifting goes on, Monday, Tuesday. So, we just get ready for high school football on Thursday nights and Friday nights, and game on Saturday.
All right. You guys can argue over this comment by Jimmy, or it's actually a question. Can Oklahoma run the ball on Nebraska?
Is that one of me?
I think it's the both of you, basically. So I'm guessing Jason's going to say yes, and you're going to say no.
Oh, let's hear what Jason has to say first.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think it's the biggest key of the game for Oklahoma and Nebraska, maybe offensively. If Oklahoma is not able to run the ball with any kind of consistency, I think it causes some problems with them offensively. Really, just kind of being more one-dimensional than anything. So it's a big test, I think, for Oklahoma's offensive line. That was, a little bit maligned in that game against Tulane, where they weren't able to run the ball very well at all. Specifically, consistently throughout the second half. So I think it's the biggest question. Nebraska's defensive line is much better than they've been, at least in the past, at least from my perspective, just kind of watching them. So I think for me, it's the biggest question. I don't know if they'll be able to, but I think if they're not able to with any sort of consistency at all, I think it's certainly going to be a red flag for Oklahoma moving forward, and what the offensive line coach Bill Bedenbaugh felt like maybe in the fall it was probably their best group that they've had since 2017, 2018. So it'll be something that's really concerning if Oklahoma's not able to run the ball at all throughout the game on Saturday.
Yeah, Nebraska's front seven have been gearing up for this, all fall, and if they don't miss tackles, that's going to be the biggest key with Nebraska's defense. If they get their tackles, they have a good shot at least slowing down that Oklahoma rushing attack, and hopefully get Spencer Rattler, back on his heels a little bit, and maybe get home a couple times on Spencer Rattler. So that's kind of the game plan for the Black Shirts coming into Saturday.
Well, I'll say, Greg, that for as good as Spencer Rattler is, which he was, of course, in that 1-2-3 conversation about the Heisman Trophy to start the season, he has had a propensity to give the ball up a couple times. So if that continues, maybe with a couple picks, obviously That is one of those steps in the formula for an upset. The other thing is, Greg, we talked about, Jason and I were just in the conversation because of some comments in the live stream when you jumped on, that in my estimation, Nebraska is going to have to come up with an offensive performance that we haven't seen in quite a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they're going to have to put two halves together because we've seen them, put up a good half. And they're going to have to play clean. That's the biggest key. If they start turning the ball over against Oklahoma, it's over. And you saw Nebraska, last week that they did a much better job of holding onto the ball. And as long as they just don't make these silly mistakes and shoot themselves in the foot, they have a good chance to stay in this game. So I think that's going to be the biggest key. And I think you're going to see Nebraska come out very run heavy. Just to try to eliminate any of those silly mistakes, and then try to catch Oklahoma off guard here and there with a couple of deep shots. So, it's all about execution for Nebraska. If they can execute their game plan and stay clean and hold on to that ball, then they have a chance to actually be able to score with Oklahoma. We saw last week with Nebraska, they had a couple of touchdowns called back. They missed 3 field goals. That's just the kind of stuff that you cannot get away with when you're playing Oklahoma. So, we're going to have to see a very, very clean game from the Huskers.
Oklahoma doesn't have the reputation of an SEC team or a high-end Big Ten team as being a physical team up front, but that's more reputation and perception. The fact is that the offensive line's been one of the best in the nation for a number of years, and the defensive line has been upgraded and improved and is much more stout after the last couple of years. Speak to the Nebraska side of things, because you'll do a much better job than I will, knowing the program inside and out, where Scott Frost addressed strength conditioning, nutrition, those things where this Nebraska, especially on the offensive front, looks more capable. We have to see it in play, but looks more capable coming off the bus than they did 3-4 years ago.
Oh, that's the biggest difference that we've seen. And, we've talked about that plenty on Huskers Live. Coach Frost and his staff have finally been able to start recruiting the types of bodies that you need to play in a power conference like the Big Ten. Like you said, coming off of the bus, you just see a bunch of just massive human beings nowadays. And right now they're just a little bit raw. You got a lot of freshmen and sophomores starting there on that offensive line. Not a ton of experience. You have some guys that have started a game here and there and have gotten their feet wet. But for the most part, this is going to be the biggest test that all of these guys have had so far in their college careers. By far the biggest game, especially on the road. I mean, you play Ohio State every year, and this is just another Ohio State for Nebraska. It just so happens they got to play Ohio State twice this year, if you're counting Oklahoma like that. So it's not like they're going to go into Norman expecting to just lay down and get rolled over by one of the top teams in the country. They're going to come out and fight, and like we've talked about so many times before, that this was a way bigger fix for Coach Frost coming in when he took this job than he ever imagined. The cupboard was extremely bare as far as bodies and talent, and so it's taken 4 years to start getting that depth that you need, and they do have that depth now. So that even helps. Like if it's going to be a very hot day or something like that, they've got a lot of guys that they can rotate in and out. So that's the biggest difference that we've seen with this roster under Coach Frost.
And for as good as Iowa and Wisconsin are, and the occasional game against Michigan, Ohio State is the standard in the Big Ten, and they've been the one team that Nebraska has basically shown us that the game can unfold a couple different ways. One would be 2018, Nebraska goes to Ohio State. They're playing the Big Ten champion, Rose Bowl champion, number 3 team in the country as it finished that year. They took them right down to the wire, 36-31. Great game, had a shot. Then you've got your 62-3 game that got out of hand. You had Justin Fields a couple of years ago in 2018 and 2019 and 20. I'm mixing up my years. 2019, 18, 19 with Ohio State. Yeah, pretty much putting up like 42 in the first half, and it's done.
Over.
You had a game in Columbus 2 years ago, or a year ago, 2020, that even though the final score got out of hand, it was a really good game into the deep into the third quarter. And so, yeah, it's going to be Oklahoma kind of being in place of Ohio State, whether Nebraska has one of those where they're able to do all the right things, keep the football in their hands, and make it a game, or that if they make some mistakes early, ouch, it can unravel pretty quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, that's been Nebraska's bugaboo here. They come out and they play a half like that, and you think that hey, they've turned things around, but all of a sudden, a couple of mistakes just kind of mushroom into about 30 points from the other team, and all of a sudden the game's over with. So yeah, I mean, we really have not seen Nebraska put together two solid halves of football. I cannot remember the last time that we saw that. And maybe they're due. Maybe it's their time to shine a little bit. And I'll tell you, they're not intimidated going to play Oklahoma. They're not in the least. They're looking at this as an opportunity, a big time opportunity to prove the country wrong. For the overall thoughts about the Cornhuskers and their program moving forward.
All right, Greg. Samuel wants you to explain your hat.
Yeah, Sam, if you can read that there, that says beef jerky on it. That has nothing to do with Texas. We hate Texas here just as much as you guys do, maybe even more. This is a branded hat for Nebraska's center, Cam Jurgens. The little NIL taken over here, and you can get these hats and shirts at beefjerky.com. So there I did my part for the NIL today for my Cornhuskers.
That's more than we can do. You've at least got a hand in it there, Greg. Very nice. Very nice. All right. Any other comments and questions? A lot of score predictions.
Yeah, none of these predictions are going to shock me, that's for sure.
That's what I said to Jason right out of the gate. I said nothing's going to shock me. I've been watching college football for 45 years, so I could see Nebraska hanging in until the very end. I could see Oklahoma making it a track meet early and it getting out of hand. Who knows?
Yeah, as Huskers, following the Nebraska team, most people probably expect that prediction to hold up there that we just saw. So, that's what Nebraska's working against there. That's what they're, they're ready to prove people wrong and maybe have that prediction a little bit closer of a score.
Guys, did they have a scheduled game for last year?
No.
And this is the second in the home. Okay, this is the first in the home and home.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say next year's the return trip, I believe.
Yep. Now this was Tom Osborne's kind of last official act when he was leaving as AD was signing this home and home series. So this is the final work of Tom Osborne right here.
And Greg, you think they should play every year? Jason, do you have any thoughts about Nebraska, Oklahoma as a series?
Yeah, no, I think it would be great. I mean, I know Oklahoma probably has to take in consideration the game in, game out schedule that they'll have in the SEC. But no, absolutely, I think it's a game that they should. If they're not playing it every year, they should play it much more often than they have been, given the fact that they haven't played each other in, I believe, 11 years. No, so absolutely.
And it would be great to have this, be a recurring series, but quite frankly, we really don't know what's happening with Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC and the Big Ten aligning themselves with the ACC and the Pac-12, and who knows if there's a boycott that you can't ever schedule an SEC team again. And, there's just so many things up in the air right now, but that are going to have to work themselves out before you can even start talking about scheduling down the road here.
I got to say, I don't really understand having an alliance that involves scheduling if you're not going to shut out the SEC.
Yeah, it makes no sense. It's just they're just being, they're trying to flex their muscle because they feel like the SEC is, trying to take over, and it's just such a weird situation with politics and everything. And I think it'll all work itself out here eventually.
Those three conferences already schedule non-conference games against each other anyway. They can schedule as many as they want against each other, the individual schools. But if you want to make an alliance, I think you either it's all just for show, or you actually do boycott the SEC. And if you've got an alliance with each other, you say we only schedule non-conference games against each other. And basically what you're doing to the SEC is you're giving them a very unattractive non-conference schedule to try to take advantage.
Yeah. It's bizarre. It really is.
And you're basically saying we'll see you in the playoffs.
Right.
Yep.
And see, this, I think, and a lot, like your question originally also came up because, Nebraska was originally supposed to play in Ireland here to kick off the season. And that's what all the controversy came up with when, people thought Nebraska was trying to dump Oklahoma off of their schedule. And that's not the case whatsoever. And, that was just trying to move your schedule around a little bit because they didn't want to just play a game here against Illinois and then have a bye week. So that was where all that controversy had came from. Just Nebraska trying to just move their schedule around a little bit to make it a little bit more accommodating early in the season.
We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. Was there anything, Jason, you would like to hit on?
No, I think the one thing that you guys had mentioned a little bit, Oklahoma has, from a turnover perspective, I think turnover, obviously it's very cliche to say turnovers are going to be a big factor in the game, but Oklahoma's forced 6, in just the first 2 games, but they've also given the ball up. I believe they've got 3 turnovers themselves. So I think, obviously both quarterbacks are a bit of gunslingers, so to speak, have a propensity to turn the ball over. Not necessarily real, good from a ball protection perspective. So I think, it might end up that one of the teams, if Nebraska is able to be +2, +3, +4 in the turnover game, then, that might be a recipe where Nebraska is able to stay in this game through the end of the fourth quarter.
Absolutely. That's Nebraska. That's what they're hoping. I mean, as long as Nebraska isn't the one giving the ball away like that, and with a very opportunistic defense so far, and a defense that is going to come to play, that's what they're hoping. They're hoping to get a couple of turnovers. They're hoping that Spencer Rattler gets rattled and throws a couple of picks, and you got a hungry Nebraska defense. Like I said, a very proud defense that is really looking to show the country just what they're all about, and that they're one of the top defensive units out there.
Greg, Oklahoma fans and Oklahoma, the football program itself, not happy with a ton of 11 a.m. kickoffs. How does Nebraska feel about that?
Hate it. Just absolutely cannot get out of that 11 a.m. hole, it seems like. Last week against Buffalo, you finally had a regular 2:30 kickoff that we're used to having around here, and to have Oklahoma Nebraska, the 50th reunion of the game of the century, one of the top rivalries in college football. One of the things that make college football special is Nebraska versus Oklahoma, and to have that at an 11 a.m. kickoff game is just ridiculous in everybody's mind around here. That should be at least a 2:30 kickoff, if not a primetime network game on Saturday night. That's something that every Oklahoma fan, every Nebraska fan, they're going to grab their families, gather around the TV, and watch Oklahoma, Nebraska, and kind of relive some of the old days. And to have that at 11 a.m., it's just asinine, in my opinion. And I understand Fox, that's their big noon, that's their big thing. And and it also, it kind of depends on what else is going on during the weekend. But yeah, we hate these 11 a.m. kickoff games around here, and especially when it's a home game, you got to be at the stadium by 8 in the morning, and it turns out to just be just a horrible day all the way around. And yeah, we're getting real sick of these 11 a.m. kickoff games. But you know what? Bottom line is you got to win games. To get those primetime games, you got to be a winning program again. And if you're in the bottom rungs of the Big Ten, you're going to get stuck with those 11 a.m. kickoffs for most of the time. But if I was Oklahoma, I'd be the ones that are really upset about an 11 a.m. kickoff game.
Yeah, in terms of being a primetime game or being considered that type of game, what you just said, I'll say yes and no to, because you're generally right. The best games, the best matchups of the day get pushed to the prime time. But then Fox, with his counter programming, basically takes the next tier of games, or what is their best game of the day, that goes to noon. So everything else gets filtered to the middle of the day, where Fox is going with this counter programming. Our big game is noon Eastern time. Ohio State, Oregon was last week.
Yeah.
So depends what network you're on.
Well, yeah, and that's for those of us in the media that are at a game, makes it real hard to watch like an Oregon Ohio State game. I had to find out who won. I was down on the field during the Nebraska game, and you had to look up and see them, or see the highlights being played on the big screen, and to find out that, oh my God, Oregon won. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It is what it is. It's all run by TV dollars, so that's just the way it's going to go. And the thing that I don't like about it is, like, these programs have a lot of fans across the country. A lot of people that live out on the West Coast. And do you want to get up at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning and tailgate and watch your favorite team? Have your oatmeal there with a little bit of football on the side? I don't think that sounds very fun.
Well, the West Coast is another dynamic that really can't be solved. I've talked about that a number of times and won't get into it here since it's Oklahoma, Nebraska, but it's just a time zone issue that's not going to be solved. It can only be worked around, because you screw somebody based on these West Coast. They don't want to be, from a TV standpoint, they don't want to be on late at night on the East Coast because they want to be seen as relevant, but then they're never going to play a primetime game.
Yeah.
Locally. So anyway, Jason, anything else that you've got for us? Oklahoma, Nebraska coming up, and of course you got the post-game show after the game right here.
No, I think in Oklahoma we echo, Greg, your sentiments on the 11 a.m. kickoff. I think it is what it is with Cox, but I think I talked about this a little bit before you came on. There was a lot of things that Oklahoma had planned for this game, kind of locally behind the scenes stuff throughout the day, just kind of commemorating the 50-year anniversary of the game of the century. And, there was just a lot of things that Oklahoma wasn't able to do because of that. So I think, the game will still be great. I think it'll be, probably one of the most watched games in the country this weekend, just because of what these two teams are from a name perspective. But yeah, so I'm super excited for it. I think it'll be a good game. I tend to think it'll be a little bit closer than the experts think, so to speak, within that 22-point spread. But looking forward to it. I think it'll be good.
Sam is letting us know that he lives in Hawaii. He has to get up at 5 a.m. to watch an 11 a.m. game.
It's brutal.
Ouch. I wouldn't even go to bed. I wouldn't trust myself to have that early.
And then we've got Matthew on the other end, who's saying, basically, I don't know where Matthew lives, but he's basically saying, I hear that there's people on the East Coast that stay up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, here you are, right here.
Yeah.
I noticed in looking at this week's schedule, it wasn't necessarily the type game that I care that I'm watching, but if I'm going to be up and who knows, still wanting to watch 15 hours of football, I guess, there's a game on that doesn't kick off till 12:30 Eastern. It's like Hawaii might be involved.
Hawaii and Oregon, baby.
that game's not going to be over until after 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, let's
Night Owls.
let's have a good one on Saturday. Oklahoma, Nebraska, just like the good old days.
That's right.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. This one that when you saw Nebraska, have this on the schedule coming, I'm talking 10 years ago, you were already excited for it. You had a home and home against Colorado, and nobody really cared about that one. But yeah, people circled this one years ago and have been waiting for this day, and it's almost here. And it really should be a good one. I'm looking forward to it, and I think that the Huskers are going to play a little bit better than a lot of people around the country think they're capable of playing.
Nebraska fans, we've got the post game for you on our Nebraska channel right after the game, and Jason's going to be right here on the OU channel right after the ball game to talk with you. I've got 6 live streams just like this the rest of the day. Ohio State right now, 1:30 Eastern. Michigan at 5, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7, Iowa at 9. So let's just keep track of the next one. Ohio State coming up at 1:30 Eastern time on the Ohio State channel. We'll see you in just a second. Jason, thank you for all that you do here on the Oklahoma channel each and every week. Greg, we appreciate you stopping by and being a guest for once.
Yeah, had a lot of fun. I like Oklahoma fans. I really do.
Get back to the cornfield. You got work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll bust my butt and earn my keep.